Hello, I'm Icicle. Welcome to my studio. If you don't know me, I make drum and bass, predominantly some other stuff, dubstep and techno. Signed to Shogun Audio, did a couple of albums with them. Today I'm going to show you a little bit about my workflow and the way I like to work. I am going to do some drums and some bass. I'm going to start with drums, sort of the sound design that I do and the layering and the processing of that quite in detail. And then also some FM8 sort of bassline type design, and also resampling, reusing in Contact. And you know, my general approach really to drums and bass and the sound design and processing that it entails. So I hope you're going to like it. Big up. Okay, so beats is what I'm going to start with. The way I usually make drums is I like to use something like Addictive Drums or maybe Superior Drummer, like a proper hyper-sampled kind of complex sort of drum instrument. And then, you know, just to get that sort of live and organic kind of feel. But at the same time, I want it to be really punchy and loud and weighty and kind of sound more like electronic drums as well. So, you know, I just want to layer it with a good solid kick and snare, like kind of more synthy sounding, and then just sort of get that all dialed in, just processed, and then resample it. Often I do in Ableton. So just kind of starting with that process, loading up just an instance of Addictive Drums. I'll just start kind of getting the sound dialed in as I like it here first. Let's just load up a sort of basic. Actually, I'll just go with good one. Just load up a sort of neutral kit like that. So you just have like kind of that kind of kick and snare. It sounds very live drummy, you know. I wouldn't really be able to use it yet. First of all, I'm just going to put in a simple pattern so that I'm just going to keep it looping while I'm editing it. So just it's going to start off just doing something very simple. There are all sort of different articulations here within Addictive Drums, which I really like. So it's the same snare but played sort of closer or farther away from the rim and whatever. You get some tighter hits and some sort of snappier, some sort of messier ones. So there's a lot of sort of to play with here. We'll just start with a kick and snare to begin. I'm gonna sort of go towards drum and bass with this, so let's just sort of set the tempo to 172. Alright, so now, first of all, here the kick, I'm just going to replace it. Let's put, like this one's got a lot of character, a bit more hollow sounding. So here at the top, we've got all of these sort of controls, pitch, envelope, that kind of stuff. And then here's sort of a run of different effects over the top. Some already sort of set up because I loaded a preset to start with. But I think it's, you know, that's all right in this case. The things I think are really important, first of all, you've got this little button here, no alts, which means that it doesn't sort of humanize your drum patterns, which is just a thing that can get a little bit frustrating. It can be great if you want to sort of modulate a real sort of funk drummer, but when we're doing sort of this more kind of electronic-y stuff, no alterations, it's just, what does it say, alternating. It's just better. It just makes it always the same sound, you know, consistent sound. For your snare as well, it's definitely important. Now, this is just the pitch envelope here. It sounds great. It's got like really good kind of, you know, range. Basically, it's just a pitch envelope. So we just start a pitch sort of high, and then, you know, over a little bit of time, it will just drop down. So this is just a really, really dramatic version of it, but I'll just get rid of the snares for a moment. So now you can just hear like a lot of attack sort of coming into it. So this is just the original sound. It's a bit flat, but this just really punctuates the beginning and just makes sort of a really sort of real sounding kick, already a lot more electronic-y. So don't overdo it completely, but we'll just sort of be in this area, and just your pitch just might be good to be in some sort of area like this. Next, you know, volume envelope. It's definitely good to sort of tighten it up a little bit because you can hear this one hums a little bit at the end and it will muddy up the mix of the drums. But for now, we'll just we'll tweak this a little bit when we have a snare that we like, so they sort of fit together nicely. You can see it has a little bit of compression and distortion on it, although it's not actually doing anything. And there's a lot of the mid EQ'd out because of this preset, so just bring it back. The tape is also not really doing a lot. One thing also, at the moment, it's got a reverb bus set up, so just turn that off, make it all a little bit more dry. Going to the snare, again, I just quickly select something different. I'm going to sort of make sure that it just plays the same sample again. I want to pitch this up a little bit. We can again use a tiny bit of pitch envelope. So there we go. Now on this one you can hear that it really sort of, you know, it's got a long tail, and I want it definitely a bit tighter than that. Now I can also hear that in the kit it's actually got two samples, so I just have to quickly unlink them. It's linked a second snare to the first. Every time you trigger this one, it will trigger this one as well, and just makes it muddy. It can be good, but in this case I just want one snare. So just to get so that it kind of tight but still organic sounding drums is what I want, sort of the sound I like. You know, in terms of the compression here, it's all, you know, it's pretty straightforward, and this sort of preset it's all right. What's interesting here is that you can sort of play with the miking positions a little bit. You can sort of have more of a snare bus, so basically have more of the bottom miking as well, or the top one you just get like a drier snare from it. It sounds nice when you get it at the bottom, just have a little bit more of a snare, a little bit more of a crispiness at the top. You could just sort of increase that as well, but also when you have a snare bus, every time the kick plays, you have like a lot of over the top, and a little bit can be cool, but doesn't always need to be there. So in terms of kick and snare, I'll dial it in a little bit further, but that's sort of definitely sort of the rough start. And then some hats. So hats will be around here. Again, there are lots of different articulations in addictive drums, so you know, it's all the same hat, but it'll be sort of very tight, or like a little bit looser, or even a little bit sort of almost open. And playing with that can just be really interesting, I find. So basically not just play the same hat all the time. Now if we, for instance, just sort of play with that a little bit. Now also purposely I'm doing slightly more open, slightly looser ones on the snares. And what I really like to do is just take them and delay them just a little bit, play them after. So that means that, especially when we get to the mixing and just really start pumping this up, the transient of the snare, that pop moment sort of comes through nice and clean, and then the hi-hat comes after that, and you get this nice drawn out kind of funky sounding snare. I find that to just really work well. So you can almost not hear it because of the sort of transient moment here being so loud already, that you think that they're actually played together, but sort of this just widens the snare a little bit and just find it to give nice results. I'm going to not do it so extreme as this because I want to tighten the hi-hats up a little bit. So again, we're going to go into the plugin, I'm going to select the hi-hat. I think this hi-hat is probably fine. All the hi-hats sound pretty nice in this. I just want it a bit up. So I just pitch it up a little bit. I'm not going to play with the pitch envelope for this, but I'm definitely going to play with the envelope. So first of all, I'm just going to tighten it up a little bit. Also, I might take out a little bit of the attack. Just find it to be sort of a bit nice sometimes. Just makes it almost a bit like a shakery kind of effect. Then also what I didn't show before, but it has a good high cut and low cut at the end. And for this like a real sort of hi-hat, this has got quite a lot of low end to it. You know, from where the drumstick is hitting the hitting the hi-hat, you know, you just sort of imagine there being some lower frequencies as well. So I just find, especially for just in the interest of sort of clean, techie beats, just kind of cutting the low end out of this. You can go. And also, you know, if you go even a little bit more, you get these really light kind of nice hats at the top. So there's sort of like a basic, sort of the organic part of my drums. Now, a little bit of processing that I would definitely apply to this. First of all, is for drums, I find very important, a little bit of alloy. So let's load up alloy. And I'm gonna, at the bottom you can see what alloy is. It's like an equalizer, then a transient, shaper, then exciter, compressor, another compressor, de-esser and a limiter. So it's a bit of a channel strip basically. But I'm gonna just use, you know, turn them on and off with the yellow button. I'm just gonna use the transient shaper. I'm gonna use that in multiband mode. And this is why this is my favorite transient shaper by a distance, because of this multiband kind of functionality. And it means I can enhance or de-enhance the transients of my drums for specific frequency areas. So now using this on this is just dry. You can have a look at where your cutoff, the crossovers are set up, and it's 120 and 2K, and that's pretty decent actually. That works pretty well because it sort of separates your kick and your snare, and you know, sort of your top end snare and hi-hats. Now if I boost the attack transient, it'll just become more punchy basically, but I'm only doing it in the mid-range so that I don't get an over-the-top kind of poppy-toppy sort of end, which you might get sometimes when you are using normal full-range transient shapers too much. So I can go really over the top with this, sort of, if you listen to that. And you know, if I was doing it like that, now you have proper sort of high-end, toppy, too much sort of tick. But because you can control that separately, I can really give sort of the lower, the body transient, like a real kick, and you just sort of feel it more in your stomach, without becoming sort of, you know, just that sort of ticky over the top kind of stuff. I might still use it a little bit. Also, great way to sort of tighten drums. It just does it really powerfully. We don't really want any of this low end, especially because I want to basically layer this up later with a proper heavy synthetic kick that will just match up this this kick here. And so I'm not going to change the transients of that too much. Although if you were to use this on like a full drum bass, this is definitely very powerful to make the kick more punchy or more taily sometimes if you don't have enough weight in it. But this is just, let's just dial it in a little bit more. Also later I'll put a little bit of limiting when I finally have those parts together, just to show you how I always overdo this a little bit, overemphasize drums so that I can limit them a bit more, that the limiter will control them and squeeze them sort of a little bit down so they sound a little bit less of this sort of extremely attenuated as they do now. One thing as well now, which I'll just apply generally, is just a bit of EQing. So I'm just going to use Pro Q, which is really nice and transparent EQ. Also, I'm just going to pull up on the master, just going to put just a quick analyzer. So I'm using Span, and I think you should definitely get Span. Span is free, and it's good to have a good analyzer. Always use the same one, learn it, and learn how things sort of, you know, kind of react to it. You know, just never obviously EQ with your eyes, but definitely use it as a tool to kind of, you know, fortify your decisions that you make by ear. So now, for instance, in Span you can see a blue and a green line for left and right. And first what I can see is that my two lines are out of phase here. They're not on top of each other for the low end. For the low end, it means just like rumble. It means like out of phase low end is just quieter. It can be a problem if you wanted to mix it to vinyl. So first thing I'm going to do on this EQ here is I'm going to switch it to mid side. I'm going to put a low cut, a very steep one, but I'm going to apply that only to the side information. So now if I just run it and just sort of look at this being out of phase, and then we do that to about just past the lower the low harmonic of the snare. And now the kick, the low parts of the kick and the snare, they are totally mono up to here, and then here all the character and the width is coming in where it doesn't take too much energy away and where you can really sort of hear that difference without it just being out of phase rumble. Just in terms of other EQing, I might give it a little bit of boost here for the full range. But for now, just keep it there, roughly. I mean, I could sort of like see that we were dipping a little bit here. We could definitely have a little bit more sort of weight roughly there, but we'll come back to that probably later. We're just sort of trying to dial it all in with the finals. So then to layer this up, I'm gonna not go too deep. Like, I mean, what I like to do a lot is sort of use FM8 and create like an FM8 kick and an FM8 snare, but it doesn't always have to be so, you know, going in so deep and just from scratch sound design. I think a good thing to just get like a bit more sort of weighty, kind of electronic-y sounding drums would be to use DrumLab, which is a very simple Native Instruments plugin. I'm just gonna run it from complete control here, and it will then map out the samples just nicely over the keyboard and give me the light guides. Let me just load up a standard. So here we go. This is just the full machine. There we go. Just going to do this first, select by MIDI note. It means every time you play something, it will just jump to the different instruments and it will drive you crazy. So I'll just turn that off. Just quickly put in a little pattern, MIDI clip, there we are. Try this one. Alright, so we're just gonna have to tighten it up. So first of all, let's actually, I'm just gonna get rid of them from my way. So I really want a heavy kind of synthy sounding kick. So just have a listen, you know, just a different. That's weighty. Just gonna tighten it up a bit. Also, again, I can hear there's some reverb on it, don't need that. Oh. Alright, so now this is just like a very sort of digitally kick, but we're just gonna try and match up the tuning with the organic sounding kick that we already have, and then use this sort of the weight that this has and the character that the other one has, and just try and marry them together. Let's just do it right away. So basically I'm just going to move the loop that I just made there out of the way quickly. This is just a quick way for me to kind of tune stuff and I'll be able to hear it. I'm just going to make, you know, this will drive your neighbors crazy, but just make a quick loop of both of them playing. So they just keep alternating like that. And then on the master I'm going to open up a span and you can see a little bit of a jump from here to here. So let's just see if I can dial that in. So just kind of go slightly off. Nicely modeled up harmonic, so it's not as clear as you can sometimes see it, but let's see if they match up. So they kind of match up fairly well now, I think. So we're going to do something similar for the snare, so we might as well just have a quick look. Use D sharp for the snare. So let's just go to D sharp, and we will. So first let's just tweak the sound for this snare a little bit. Sounds very real, like quite like that one. I think it'll work, but it's not quite a snare. I want something a bit more synthetic. Probably use something like that. It sounds a little bit cheap there, but we just wanted to sort of work underneath it. tighten it up just a little bit. Alright, so now let's have a quick little look at, I'm just going to turn that down, I think we're probably a little bit into that. So just have a look at the analyzer again. Now you can see like sort of a fundamental harmonic here and here. So we just want to match them up. That'll be sort of the main pitches. So let's just see how close we can get. Can't quite get there. So just tune the whole thing up. We'll just have to tune the bass down a little bit later. I think, you know, obviously what I've done is I have pitched up the original addictive drums a lot. So I'm just gonna pitch down a little bit on the addictive drums so that we can get there, get to the same area. So just keep looking. You can see there's still a tiny little bit of sort of jumping. But we're just gonna go somewhere roughly in that area. Now, let's just go back to the original drums. Let's just layer up the patterns. Misclicking slightly. Oh. It was. Alright, so we've got like a bit of a matching layer now. Just go down a little on the master because we are in the reds. Now this will need a bit of processing. It'll probably be a very good idea to duplicate the channel now and just have the kicks and snares separately. So here we'll just have the kicks and here we'll just have the snares. Now, first of all, let's just focus on the kick. So good. So now I'm just going to apply a little bit of EQ to it first. So we'll just have. I'll just bring out a little bit of the top end of it, I think. Just sort of scan through it a little bit. I think overall they sort of work quite well together right now, so I'm just not going to touch it that much more. And then the snare. Now I'm going to get an EQ on this. Let's just turn the EQ on here, so the analyzer. Now we could really focus on the lower harmonic and just kind of bring that out a lot. It just brings lots of weight into your drums. Obviously I've overdone it a little bit, but you can see 15 dB. You can see really sort of this kind of, you know, this frequency really brings out the weight in the drums, and the weight is what I want sort of from this layer. I'm going to apply a low cut because I can see there's stuff going on here and those are all frequencies you don't need. It's not that much really, to be honest. And then I'm sort of looking at the top end. I can probably bring some of that stuff in, like, you know, just attenuate the tops a little bit. Roughly there. Now on this I'm going to use an alloy again because I want this snare to be really pokey, really quite over the top, to be honest. I just want it to be functional. I'm going to use the multiband as we did before. Just going to tighten it up, but sort of, you can hear now we've got slight conflict of transients. Both of the transients are here. You can kind of hear that they're sort of fighting a little bit. I'm just not going to emphasize the top end of this one too much, but sort of keep it in this kind of rough area. Now this sort of is like kind of the rough layering of the drums done. It's still not, you know, super banging. I'm gonna basically bust them together, sort of. So I'm gonna basically all send them to the same channel and then put some more processing over the top of all of them. So if I take these three channels and instead of sending them to the master, I will send them to the new audio channel I just made, audio 4. Make sure that you enable the input, and now you can see everything just runs through here. by the way, one quick thing I forgot to do, just this plug preset in Addictive Drums has the hi-hat slightly to the side, and that's not what I want. So there we go, everything straight to the middle. Now, I mean, at this point, we can do some more EQing, a little bit of saturation and limiting. This is just really down to taste, I guess, or like what you're really looking for, whether you want to tighten it. One thing I think is interesting to show here is a little bit of saturation on it. I like to use Saturn for that, FabFilter Saturn. Really nice kind of, you can go quite over the top with this, but it's got cool, really nice, actually fairly powerful EQ, very simple sort of 4-band EQ, but I find that to be fairly useful very often. And also what's nice is, for instance, I'm on the tape mode, I'm kind of going a bit too far, but then you have a dry wet, so you can go a little bit too far, really bring out the sort of crispiness, and then just while you're doing that, just kind of dial it back a little bit and still have sort of the clean kind of full drums as you wanted them. Also, it's a little bit, it has dynamic setting, it's not just a distortion, it has sort of, you know, kind of limiting kind of capacity. And you can hear sort of these dynamics are actually really good for drums if you already want to kind of squeeze it a little bit there, you know, just tighten it up a lot, you can do, for instance. Or, you know, just really open it up, just depending for what kind of sound you're looking for. But I just find it's a really nice way to brighten stuff up a little bit. Also, because now we have these sort of different kicks and snares and drums, just kind of get that gelling, you know, from processing it together just a little bit, just so that it kind of glues together a little bit more. So some more processing on the drum bus I might put on. Again, I could go over the top, a little bit of alloy would not be wrong here. Again, you know, obviously we've already done it a lot there, but also, you know, just the final touches here. It's a lot of control, you can change the drums again, but also because of that sort of combined processing, I find they all come together just a little bit more again. So, and definitely after the saturation, you do lose some snap and stuff. You know, we can really sort of play with this, and like, you know, there are lots of different types of kind of drums you can go for, really. But you know, I'm not going to go too over the top, but definitely really worth playing around with. And I'll just put a little bit of limiting on it, because these drums need some limiting to really finally show you where we're at. So if I put a Pro L on it, basically go into the advanced and settings, and one great way to set it up for drums is punch is the best mode. With these overemphasized transients, I don't want to look ahead, because those sort of proper boop moments, they're going to disappear if you have the look ahead on, because it will just anticipate every loud transient. But it's really nice when it's actually too late for that, and just sort of almost distorts a little bit, because it's just sort of attenuation, just works out. Just going to link the transients. It's not super important in this case because the stereo image is well controlled, but might as well do it. We're going to bring this down to, like, say 10 milliseconds and virtually no release, just a tiny bit. And this will just kind of have those transients. It will just be a little bit late on the transients, and they will still be emphasized, and then it will just, you can really squash it basically. So I'll show you. So this is it. It's already, I mean, the gain reduction is a lot. Might seem like a lot, but because we have a super reactive limiter, you know, this is really not that much, and it moves super fast. You can see it's really for the transient moment. But now we can just, you know, you can just go nuts. It really depends on what kind of tune you want to make with it, but you can definitely go into this sort of territory. And you know, now sort of together with the addictive drums, now we finally have it sort of controlled. So the transients are controlled, the whole weight and the distribution of the drums is as I want it now, basically. And the limiting of it is definitely an important stage. So without the limiting, you just have too pokey. Sometimes for my tunes, when I send them off for mastering, they don't want the limiter on it. And all you hear is just like pop, 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 with like quiet music in the background. So the limiter really does a lot. It's just an essential part of it. This is all, the processing is set up so that after the limiter it will all sound natural but punchy. So now I think, you know, at this point I could start a tune with it, or I could just sort of save some processing power and also, you know, make it easier for myself and basically resample this and use it in a drum rack in Ableton and slice it basically to a drum rack. First of all, the resampling in Ableton is genius. You just start up an audio channel like that, and we will then hear the input. You set it for resampling, it just has a mode. Make sure you record enable it. And now it will sample anything to this channel that's playing. So, you know, you can just solo a bunch of channels and it will just record that, which is a really, really smart way of doing it. You don't have to route buses or, you know, obviously I could just hit record on this channel in this instance, but if you might have something a bit more elaborate, or you're going, you know, you want to just do a quick recording to make an edit of a part of your tune and you only want a few things, then you don't have to bounce it out. You just solo those things, set it to resampling here, and then, you know, you can just sort of see. So there you go, just have the beat instantly. I'm just gonna have no input now, so let's make sure it's there. Now let's have a listen to this. So basically, I don't think we've got the deprocessing on it now, so let's just actually record it here anyway. So we're gonna record it to this channel. Yeah, so basically the bus was not included in that. Now let's move this one down. Good, so now we have our fully loud processed drums here. Now the slicing, the automatic slicing in Ableton is really cool. So it just, first of all, because it's Ableton, it will warp your audio and it will detect all of your transient slices, you know. So you can see here, it's already automatically detected them all. They're all very much on point, but you could edit them a little bit if you felt it necessary, if you might make something quite loose. But the main sort of, yeah, really good bit about Ableton this moment is that you could just resample it to sort of the drum rack. Now the drum rack is just like kind of, it's not really an instrument, it's more like, you know, like a controller in which you can load instruments and you can make your own slicing presets for it, which I think is another thing that people know too well. So for instance, if I go here, I right click and I go slice the MIDI, then at this point it asks me what kind, you know, how it slices to transient, all those markers. You could do, you know, 2 straight beats, for instance, if you wanted that. But also, then it has a preset. Well, there's a bunch of sort of presets that it comes with, but none of them I find are very sort of tuned to drum needs somehow. So you can make your own. And to make your own, we'll just quickly make our own one, and then we'll use it on this. So I'm gonna just set up the form for how I want this to be sliced. So first of all, I'm just gonna start here, MIDI track, and I'm gonna go to instruments, and there I'm gonna load up a drum rack. So here we go. It's just literally sort of an MPC or, you know, Machine Studio style sort of pad control, with then for every pad it has a slot for, you know, something to be loaded up into. It can be synthesizers or whatever. You can go really versatile with this. But if you just keep it simple for this, we're going to load a sampler. I'm just going to throw it in here for the shape. So now this has, like, this pad here has a sampler on it. And again, I'm not going to load anything into it. I'm just building the structure of it so that it can be applied to every slice here. And what's important to be doing now is to set up your macro controls, because that's really useful when you have, like, you know, 16 slices later on. So first of all, let's open up the macros. So we have 8 assignable controls here, and we just set them up to stuff that we like. So for instance, I think, you know, for drums, we're going to have ADSR envelopes. So, or let's apply them to the top. So here I'm going to go to the attack from the envelope, just the amp envelope. I'm going to go map to macro 1. Then macro 2 will be decay, onwards for sustain, and for release. So now you can see we have that here. So that those are, like, you know, very useful things. Now, one thing that there is not a proper slicing preset for is to have pitch, one of the most important bits. So just go into control, and we have here the transposition. So we will map that to macro 5. Also, you can see for some reason the defaults here, the default settings will be what it loads up later. So we'll just put sort of the drums fully open. Like that, and we will put transpose to 0. Not sure why when you map this for the first time it would assume that you might want -48 default, but it does it that way. You know, you could then assign, for instance, some filter parameters. So for instance, let's just assign to 7 and 8 the resonance, and, you know, we're gonna sort of default set it to this. we have now a low pass filter that's fully open without any resonance. I mean, I might be, for instance, inclined to assign the filter type to this remaining macro, but you know, it's up to you. For the time being, I'm gonna go with this. So I'm gonna save this, and it comes up there. Now I'll just call it like a slice preset. And to make this available for sort of selecting, just in the user library, you're gonna go to defaults, and it will open, and then slicing, and just drop it in there basically. So now if we go to, you can delete that. If we go to slice the new MIDI track, transient, and we're gonna go to slice preset, it's available here now. We go OK, and we come out with a sliced rack. So now you can see it's just sort of made for every hit of the drums here. It's made, you know, corresponding note. It has the MIDI, and on the channel we can just see we have like every channel has all of those parameters that we have assigned. So just see why it is. First of all, just, you know, you can see that this one is outside of the too many different programs. Right, the first. All right. So let's just tighten this up. And it's coming out a little bit unnatural. Why is that? Yeah, so it's basically cut the transients a little bit unnatural. Let's just use this preset. Size dynamic. Do slice weight. Alrighty. Oopsie. There you go. So now let's go again. The first one's falling slightly outside, and now we've got sort of more or less. It's obviously a little bit tighter, but this is more or less the same setup. So we've got like our the envelope here. Also especially important, the pitch now on the left. Got the filter if you want to apply that. But most importantly, sort of now this whole sort of drum break is fully controllable. So basically, like one thing I still want to definitely talk about is how sharp and tight the envelopes are on the simpler and with this setup in Ableton. I mean, I work in Logic and Cubase as well quite a lot, but I've never come across envelopes that are so punchy as this, and it's very useful for drums especially, because let's say if we set up our drum slightly pitched up, nice and short, whatever, a bit longer. So kind of useful like this, but if we've already made quite punchy drums to begin with here, but if we were to do, if we thought that we didn't have enough punch in the drums, I just find it really useful just to duplicate the channel, and then in the second one we have the same settings, but we just go super short and just get almost clicks, as you can hear now. And this is just over the top and sort of an attenuation layer. Just find that you can really hear sort of how you go from this. Obviously I'm doing this with very punchy drums, so this is slightly overkill, and you can really, obviously now we have like a lot of sort of this poppy attenuation, but if we now very quickly were to just get rid of all of them, we just sort of have even more transient definition right away. We can just, so we're just sort of layering that over the top, and I find that a really useful way to very quickly sort of boost your transients, just chuck them straight in. So yeah, that's about the full process of kind of matching up and layering drums and then resampling and slicing them back into Ableton. So another thing, a little bit of bassline kind of sound design, as I like doing it and maybe you like hearing about it. I use FM8 a lot these days for a lot of stuff, and also my drums, but before we didn't really touch on it, so I think we should do some FM8 stuff. First of all, just on the master again, like I did before, I'm just gonna drop in span, just for some analyzers running in the background. I was doing it before a little bit, but I always run these on the second screen and just have that sitting there and just make my choices, you know, just also based a little bit on what I'm seeing here as much as what I'm hearing. You know, we're just gonna go from scratch and just kind of freestyle it into something useful, resample it a bit, and just to sort of show kind of different ways of using it. So you've got FM8, so it's just sort of playing a standard, just, you know, sine wave more or less. Now, first of all, most people are kind of afraid about, you know, a bit intimidated by FM synthesis, and they don't really understand it, and why should I use it, and just kind of stick to subtractive type of stuff just because maybe it's a bit more intuitive to people. But really the main thing with FM is just like taking one sound source and using it as an LFO on the pitch of another sound source. Like you have a carrier and a modulator. So a carrier will just be an oscillator as you're used to, and a modulator will be another you know, oscillator as you're used to, but rather than mixing them together like subtractive, it will be used to modulate the pitch, the frequency of the first one. So for instance, just to kind of illustrate that very quickly, I always do this one, but it's almost becoming cheesy. But if I, over here basically the layout of FM8, just quickly for people that might not know it, you have a matrix sort of editor here, and this is like kind of an abstract kind of representation of the internal workings of FM8. You have F, E, D, C, B, A, sort of working backwards more or less as your oscillators or operators as they are called here. And then you have a filter and noise and saturation kind of, I don't know what you would call this really, but like, you know, just a saturator and a filter. And then this is a matrix routing, sort of a routing matrix, so you can just send something from one place to the next. Essentially right now, for instance, I have operator F, or just if you want, you know, we can say oscillator here, it's not technically correct, but it's running. Now if I click on it, you know, here on the left I can see my sort of my rough parameters for that. And this line here, these boxes, they will represent my output. So what I'm doing now is sending F straight to the output by 100%. So, you know, it's just one oscillator going straight to the output. Now, this is just a sine wave, as you heard before. You can see it here as well, one single clean harmonic, you know, it's coming out like that. Just to kind of quickly illustrate what FM really does, if we turn on E here, and I'm gonna go, the ratio, which is sort of the frequency, is more or less the relation to the note that you play. So frequency of 1 is just a note. If you go 2, you'll just go to double the frequency, etc. If I use 0, it means no frequency, it means it's not doing anything. It's a sine wave, that's what you can choose here. This is your envelope. So we'll just keep everything sort of straightforward, on and off, sine wave here as well. Second one, also a sine wave. So now I could send this sine wave also to the output and have additive, sort of traditional kind of synthesis. But here essentially I can send it into F and start modulating this operator with this operator. And at that point, if I just do this 100%, nothing really happens apart from a little click at the beginning, but nothing really happens because the ratio is still 0. But if I go up very slowly, so I'll have a very low frequency, or an LFO, low frequency oscillator basically, now you can really hear what it's doing. You can see it as well. You really just have an LFO on the pitch, you know. But why FM synthesis is so interesting to me is just when you go basically up, and this frequency here, that LFO, is actually going to go into like a normal oscillating domain, or the audible domain. Audibly, the sound is starting to steady out. So now there's no more, there's a little bit of sort of interference, but it's becoming this sort of constant sound. You know, and if we now look at the analyzer here, now we have a super complex sound with loads of different harmonics. They're interfering a little bit. But this is really the benefit of why I like, you know, FM8, is because we've used two simple sine waves, fed them into each other, and we've come up with so much harmonic information already. So basically, that's why you would, if you had like a subtractive synthesizer, all you could do is have two sort of harmonic peaks here together, and to get it more interesting, you would need to have saturation, filters, and other effects in the signal path. So, you know, when you're sort of wondering why should I even use it, it's because very quickly, essentially, you can make super complex harmonic signals. Now, sort of with the basics, I mean, just kind of showing roughly how I do some sort of bases. If I'm just gonna draw in a note and leave it looping. Just misclicked again. There we go. Let's move this slightly out of the way. So let's go. So clean big sub. Now you can do so many different things with this, but let's just go for something a little bit sort of on the kind of MIDI kind of sort of more aggressive, maybe a bit techy almost sort of sound. So first of all, to build a little bit of a foundation, we're just going to use this one, but the first oscillator, but I'm going to feed a second one into it. And did I just offset it too much? Oh, right, there you go. Thought I reset that one. So this one will just be at 1, both at 1. Now, so I'm now feeding just a sine wave at the same ratio into the first one, and I'm already getting some extra warm harmonics, so that's a good, nice little place to start. Also, let me just turn on the loop, and also let's make it a drum and bass speed, just for any modulation later. So I've got like a slightly warmer sine wave to begin with, it's a good foundation. Also what I might do with this is just feed it back into itself, and that's when you get like just different harmonics building up fairly exponentially. So you can go that crazy basically, but it's just a quick way of just kind of warming stuff up a little bit again as well. And this is a little boring in the sense that now, you know, it's drifting tiny bit, but it's fairly consistent sound. So we can go off slightly the ratio on this modulator. And we're just starting to get this sort of movement. So we just have sort of, it's almost a little bit like an old school kind of Reese sort of sound, but fairly clean, and you know, just a little bit of movement in it. At this moment I'm doing this with two sines, definitely where, for instance, you're going a little bit more into different wave shapes, and it's got loads, but sines are definitely sort of the most clean and honest way of working with an FM synth, I find, and you can do a lot with it already. But you know, you could get something like, you know, like this, you just definitely sort of play with it a bit. So, you know, that's kind of a good foundation. Now this, what I have is just a constant sound, a little bit of interference, a bit warmed up, just a kind of a sub end sort of a sound. But what's really nice is just to sort of start building all the modulation and the articulation over the top, as using this as a foundation. So if I'm gonna use another operator here. Now the envelopes on FM8 are great. They're really sort of, you can make really interesting shapes with them. So if I'm just looking at it here now, and you know, I have just like, you know, just a sort of a square ADSR, so no attack, no release, and just decay and sustain fully up. But you know, you can play with this in many different ways, and also essentially you can tempo sync it, which is great. So it just means you can sort of snap to a grid for your envelopes, and especially when modulating sort of complex sounds, it's really definitely a good thing to do. So for instance, now, so this is sort of more or less on a half a bar. It's just coming in, and it's just basically just following this. One thing I should say about the envelope is you can see you have this red region here, and if you inside here edit something, that means it just keeps on looping it. It becomes a looping envelope. If you want not looping envelope, you can just edit before the red line, and then you know, you'll just sort of run and then leave this section open, and it will just be sort of a one-off envelope. But looping is quite cool for this. Now, see, just in terms of what this sound now is. Oh, so this is now what you have, just sort of this, like a looping envelope of this type of sound. You know, we can go a bit higher. But essentially you can go really crazy with this stuff. You just add some more points and just let's see. I just get like some more types of articulation. Now I'm just sending this out so you can hear roughly what it is, but if we feed that in, if we sort of feed that in, you can really hear this sort of the articulation you get. And if we sort of, if we just turn that, so sort of just play with that a bit, you know, there's just sort of ways of kind of making it a little bit more, you know, just saturate the harmonics a little bit more on this one. Again, you know, I just went with a sine wave and just like a slight ratio up. You can definitely, you know, play with your waveforms and your ratios here and just start, you know, getting some really sort of cool and harmonic results. Also, you know, if ratio is, it's, you know, if you want to know exactly which ratios correspond to which notes, just look up Google ratio table for frequency modulation. You just work out exactly sort of what the intervals of notes, how they sort of translate to ratio numbers, but it's pretty straightforward. So basically at this moment, you know, you just sort of mess with this a little bit. You can, for instance, hear how these sort of, these different weird kind of intervals will just give you sort of these almost dissonant types of sounds, but you know, we're just going to keep it sort of fairly straightforward. Now, if I can just keep doing this, so for instance, I may use this as sort of a general sort of shape of this bass. So, but you know, this sound itself, I can have, say, that be modulated again, so the modulator be modulated, and I can go, you get really sort of really high harmonics. But now if I, for instance, do something along the lines of this, and just go fairly long, you can just over the top a little bit. So you see that this sort of shape, this sort of harmonic that's laying over it, then sort of, you know, this modulates it more and more to sort of become that sort of articulated. Now it doesn't sound particularly well. And again, you got to realize we're using only 4 operators, feed them into each other and get stuff that's really complex and sounds like it's highly filtered and whatever. And that's just kind of, you know, the power of this. You can just sort of all the harmonics and the bands, just individually control them with the envelopes, and just get them sort of to play where you want them, rather than just filter a full sound in and out. So, you know, just as I said, it's just freeform. We're just going for it a little bit. I'm just going to set up a few master parameters on it so you get an idea of what we can really achieve with this. First of all, the unison in this is pretty cool. So at the moment we just have one voice, but if I now go up, so you know, you get that real sort of, you know, phasery sound, which is definitely good for the more techy type of bass line. So just use a little bit of that. Also here we have sort of quality parameters, and we have digital and analog. Analog being a bit of a drifty analog kind of sound. Doesn't always work too well in my opinion, but the digital can be good, especially if you're looking for something a bit more colder, a bit EDM-y. You know, it just, it really downgrades your sound, but you know, that is definitely something modern these days. Definitely not people making good use of it. Got a portamento here and things like that. But sort of kind of listening to this, you know, this is probably something getting towards a place of it being useful. One thing I use a lot on FM8 is the pitch envelopes as well. So here you have something similar, you know, in terms of the operators when it comes to controls, but this is just your pitch envelope. So if you double click, by the way, in here, you automatically full screen zoom to your envelope. Sound like this. What's good for me is, for instance, just putting a little pitch drop at the beginning of the envelope. So you get that sort of that kind of attenuation at the beginning. There's lots of ways to be cool with this. I think you can just let some really come from a low area, but always ends up working fairly well for me, just to put like a little bit of this at any hits, just for when you start using it, make a melody or whatever out of it, just have that kind of punctuation at the beginning and just makes it cut through the mix more. You know, you can definitely play with this. And now, you know, one thing is when I'm sound designing, so if I'm not doing something like this inside of a tune, but I'm just trying to make some crazy basses to use later, this is just something that's quite fun, just to play with the pitch envelope a little bit. So, and we'll just come up with some, literally a bit fairly random, but just kind of pitch envelopes on this, and we're just gonna make some weird shit. Just get some. So this is just, I'm just literally doing some random stuff, but I'm looking to basically resample this and get the nice bits out of it later. So, you know, this is just like just an approach to kind of freeform, build some stuff in here. I'm not really using the filter in this, although it's good. There's much more powerful filters, so I definitely want to filter this, but I'm going to do that with something else. There's a noise generator in here as well. It could be nice sometimes just to add some noise into it, but again, for this sound, I don't think it's too useful. So this is just, you know, like a general approach. Some processing, I think, on these sounds. You know, first of all, I might just EQ it a little bit, because you can really, FM8 is a little bit timid in a way. You can never really make it go nuts, and it's, you know, there's nothing wrong with going nuts. So just kind of roughly looking at this, I might actually just keep the analyzer open here, and some of it comes out a little bit stupid, but that's fine. It will be all controlled later. Just boost the sub end a little bit. I think it's. Just a little bit of articulation in it. Now there are just a million ways for processing now, you know. I mean, I used to really do a lot of distortion first and then some modulation to kind of take the edge off, and filtering and EQing. I do it less and less, and I try to more and more get the right sounds in FM8 as much as possible, but you know, a bit of saturation. Already work fairly well, and you know, there's different kinds of modulation to be able to apply to this, but I think we'll just keep it fairly harsh for the moment. You can just play with this a little bit more if you want to really get more sort of width into it. So now, you know, just as a base, sort of a basic sound, we could just use the resampling function. So just go here, enable a new audio channel, enable resampling, enable recording. So let's just. So now we have an audio version of that. Now. Let's just consolidate this so that it's just that. So there's like certain bits I like in there where it's just the little articulation which just comes up a little bit, and you know, resampling this is, I think, you know, a really good thing to do now. So if we load up Contact, which is definitely my go-to sampler in this kind of case. And we'll just run the sample through here. Oh. So we have that's. So now we're running that sample nice and easy, just, you know, resampling to the channel, chuck it in here, and we're already there. First of all, when you're in contact for some reason sets the release to 300 milliseconds default. It's just, I don't understand why it does that, but it makes everything bleed if you don't control that right away. And you know, we can go in deep on contact, but just especially for the sort of the sampling, the editing of the, you know, the start points and whatnot, I find it really interesting. So if we go here into the wave editor, you can already see that it's fairly useful to begin with, but we can use tiny tick at the beginning. So you can hear all these sort of, because I just made a fairly sort of weird and retarded all over the shop pitch bend, we can just get these sort of, just everywhere we move it, have all these different articulations. So if you know, it just sort of comes up with lots of cool stuff now. So depending on what you're looking for, you could resample this a few times, make a couple of different hits with it. Also, definitely one thing I really like is just if I use like a loop in here. Ooh. Am I just an idiot here? There you go. So just set up a little looping section. Just make sure you crossfade it a bit. So if I could properly reach my pitch wheel, you just get the full benefit of that. You can really see you get all these different cool articulations, you know, at this point. I mean, you know, inside of Contact there are loads of cool ways of sort of, you know, just applying more effects. But one thing that I would definitely, at this moment still, I might use a little bit of EQ to really get it into the, just get all the articulation out of it that I want. So, you know, I can really see it's a bit flat, to be honest, so we can really sort of push. So, you know, just a little bit of EQ here, just, you know, you always, you know, like, I think less experienced producers, they never have enough sort of definition. There's always top ends really that are missing, and even though people might be a little bit afraid to kind of really put it in, you know, just to boost things a little bit. Look at what I'm doing here, 20 dB peak. But it doesn't sound over the top, you know, and looking at the analyzer, I'm nowhere peaking anyway, it could still be more. One thing that is really nice about Ableton in this for this kind of bass, definitely I quite like, is one of the standard plugins, which is called Erosion. So I will just drop that in here, and it just feeds white noise into stuff, but it really works of kind of bringing out the definition a little bit. If I just go for like noise, whatever, just kind of increase the width. And you can just hear it puts a little bit of white noise into the sound. If you use it fairly moderately, it's a really good way of kind of brightening up the sound. I think, you know, at this point, it's all getting a little bit sort of over the top, really, and also maybe slightly harsh. So we could do a little stage of modulating. I haven't got my more go-to sort of phaser on here, I'm realizing, but let's just use a volcano. It's just a bit of a filter, because you can play with the start times of individual bands in the filter. It also works a little bit like a phaser. So if we just go into the so it's already kind of, it's making stuff move around a little bit. But again, like what we did with drums, the final stage here, definitely we have to control the stereo image a little bit, because we can't have too much out of phase sort of low end, because it will just mean that both speakers will be sort of playing out of phase, and you'll just not get the most amount of weight out of your bass. And obviously we live in a loudness war landscape, so we have to tidy that up a little bit. There's no real difference. You can't really hear the out of phase bass anyway, so it's not like we're losing anything, in my opinion. So I'm going to apply a mid-side EQ finally here. Oh. Again, I'm going to apply the only sideband sharp low cut. Let's just, for the full experience, we can actually see in this case that the low end is really controlled already, because I guess the stereo effects I've applied them fairly minimally. But this is just a peace of mind. This is here, but also at the same time, what we can do now is just increase the width. So what I'm doing here is just pushing the sides, so only all the sounds that are basically different in each speaker, and as a result I'm just widening it loads. So you can definitely start hearing some width coming into that. If we really want to get the benefit of this, or show you exactly how this will work, and also something most people might not do on basses, but we can apply a tiny bit of reverb to the whole sound. So before this EQ, we will get a hollow room, and just keep it really short. So now you can really start seeing all that mid coming out, but you wouldn't really put too much reverb on these types of basses, but because we are controlling the side image a lot. So my mouse keeps getting caught. So you can really kind of play with that width and just get the most of it. I mean, a little bit of limiting after this would definitely not hurt it, I think, just for leveling. So if we just put a Pro L here quickly, we'll give it some look ahead this time. We'll use it transparently. No attack, almost no release, so all it does is just kind of brings it all back to the top level. You see a lot of movement in it there. So now we're just leveling this off, because with all the interference and the movement, we are getting a lot of sort of, kind of differences in peaks, and just leveling that out will make it louder again. But I mean, this is roughly the process I take from sort of taking an FM8 sort of sound designy kind of bass, resampling it, and then just different types of processing just to make it sort of useful and applicable to projects. So yeah, that was it. Alright, so thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope it's been useful for you. Now go and make awesome music. I've been Icicle. Check me out, facebook.com/iciclemusic, and all the other relevant social media, same suffix. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.